Now, the IMF, on the other hand, says the majority of countries in sub-Saharan Africa are right on the cusp of a significant demographic transition. That shift should see a decrease in the very young and elderly and a huge upswing in the number of those in the working age range, between 15 and 64. Now, that's significant because throughout recent times, other global regions, specifically Latin America and Asia, that transition has generally led to higher savings, higher incomes, and a lot more economic growth over a longer period of time. Now, it's predicted that by 2030, sub-Saharan Africa's contribution to the increase in global labour force will exceed the rest of the planet combined. Now, that shift will provide African economies with quite a few opportunities, but at the same time, quite a few challenges too. You see, as populations grow, so too does the demand for services, infrastructure, and employment. Let's get more details on that particular reporter. Joining us live from our Washington studio to talk about this a little more is Roger Nord. He's the Deputy Director in IMF's African Department. Mr. Nord, thank you for your time. How significant really is this demographic transition in terms of sub-Saharan Africa's future in economic growth and the rise in living standards some may expect?
This demographic transition represents a significant economic opportunity for sub-Saharan Africa. Let me give you a few numbers. According to the United Nations populations projection, the current population in sub-Saharan Africa of around 800 million will reach 2 billion by 2050. And in the next 25 years alone, the working age population is set to double. And as you said in your intro, the contribution of sub-Saharan Africa to the global working age population will exceed that of all other regions combined by 2030. This demographic transition, a period of rapid growth thanks to a sharp increase in the working age population, is a very significant economic opportunity for sub-Saharan Africa. In the study that the IMF did a few months ago, we estimated that provided economic and social policies are right, this could mean that by 2050, GDP per capita in sub-Saharan Africa would be up to 50% higher than it would have been in the absence of this boost from the demographic transition.
Indeed. Take us through the examples in history. I know you referred to Latin America and Asian countries in the study. How did this demographic transition shape their future when they're essentially at the same point sub-Saharan Africa is in right now?
Indeed, Latin America and East Asia provide some good examples for Africa. Both Latin America and East Asia went through their demographic transition in the 1960s and 70s, but the outcomes were quite different. East Asia was able to seize much more of the demographic dividend than Latin America did. Why? In our analysis, there were probably two main factors. One is that in East Asia, public policies also encouraged a reduction in childbearing and essentially brought down fertility rates more rapidly than in Latin America. And maybe more significantly in an economic sense, policies in East Asia aimed squarely at increasing the productivity of the labor force through good education policies, for example, but also through policies that strengthened skills in the labor force and that attracted investment and basically raised productivity at a rapid clip. And that allowed East Asia to reap a significant demographic dividend over the last 30, 40 years.
Indeed. One final question for you, Mr. Nord. The report also did state that economies accounting for roughly 60% of current global GDP had a working age population peak in 2010, and that's essentially in decline now. What opportunities do African countries have here? A move into manufacturing, perhaps?
I think there are significant opportunities for sub-Saharan Africa to take advantage of both of their own demographic dividend and of the relatively rapid aging in the rest of the world. But to get it right, policies have to be right, both economic policies and social policies. On the economic front, sub-Saharan Africa will need to put in place an environment that is attractive to business. That means addressing infrastructure gaps in transport, energy, for example, strengthen financial services so that savings can be channeled to investment, and of course, seize the global market where essentially the growth is going to take place. And that means integrating into global value chains as rapidly as possible. But let me underline again, social policies are equally important. Health policies and education policies to ensure that the young population is well equipped to be able to seize the opportunities that this demographic transition offers them.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. Roger Nord, the Deputy Director of the IMF's African Department, joining us from our studios in Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time.